Ready to revolutionize your higher ed marketing game?
Yes.
Well, then don't miss out on Element 451's Engage Summit, June 27 and 28. Explore the cutting edge world of education and AI technology and unleash your creativity like never before. Register today at engage.element451.com and use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. The global gathering for educators and institutions is here. Anthology Together is where inspiration, connection, networking, and EdTech insight and innovation intersect into the premier event destination for the global education community. Registration is open. Go to anthologytogether.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salucio back with you on another episode. Thank you to those of you that have picked up commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education. I said I will thank you every single time, and I really meant it. I will. It's been in the hands now of thousands of higher ed professionals, business professionals across the world, and we could not be more grateful for your love and support. Over 125 presidents informed the book, and we are just so happy that we could bring it to the community and contribute in that way. Today, we're having a very, very, I just like very, very, you could say very 100 times. That's how important this conversation is going to be today, because it is about one of the things that has to happen or maybe doesn't happen in your institution with every single interaction between people, between students, between administration and faculty and administration, students and faculty, blah, 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 blah. And the person that's here to talk to us about a topic called customer service is my guest today, and here he is. He's Gary Johnson, and he is author of Wowed, using the principles of WOW to create incredible customer service. Gary, what is going on?
Doc, how you doing today?
I couldn't be better. I used to have a boss that said, if I was doing any better, it wouldn't be fair.
Well, that's a good place to be.
That's good. Yeah.
I love it. We got a beautiful day here in St. Louis. It's gorgeous. I'm excited. This is like my favorite topic. So
Excellent.
Exactly. It was what I was getting ready to say.
I know you were.
But it's awesome. And what do you think about what's going on with University of Phoenix? I guess you probably have been paying attention to that story.
My of course, one of my trusted colleagues,
Yes.
Dr. Bill Pepicello, the former president of University of Phoenix, has been helping narrate what's happening and going on. But it is very interesting to see. But I think the point is that everybody's trying to do something. Not everybody. Some schools are trying to do something to remain competitive and sustainable. What's interesting about some of the mega brands is that they are kind of positioning. Like, who's going to get there? University of Maryland Global Campus, Purdue Global,
Right.
Iowa now, so it's interesting.
It's an interesting time in business in general. We're really seeing a lot of it in higher ed. And I want to, first of all, tell you how much I loved your book.
Oh, thank you, sir.
It was fantastic. I loved all the interviews. I thought it was really, really interesting as someone who's working on his doctorate. So I'm not
the future Dr. Gary Johnson.
Yes, which school has always been really, really important to me. Higher education is something that's near and dear to my heart. And there's a lot of change going on, right? There's a lot of things going on that we need to pay attention to as leaders. So what I'm hoping we get into today, what we talk about today, is our role in higher education as leaders.
Yeah.
When you look at the book I've written and you talk about things that are going on in this business, I start this book talking about somebody named Captain Michael Abrashoff. I don't know if you remember this.
No, I remember reading it in the book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a great, he wrote a book called It's Your Ship. It's a phenomenal book. And basically what it talks about is his time as the captain of the USS Benfold. Now, for all of those people in the audience that are like, okay, well, what's the USS Benfold? It was a destroyer and is a destroyer in the United States Naval Fleet. And when Captain Abrashoff took over, that ship was at basically the bottom of the Pacific Fleet in what's called combat readiness. So it was scoring very exactly. And that's what he said when he took the job. And when he came in, they were booing the other captain off the ship.
Yeah, they booed him on his way out.
Yeah, so they gave him the Bronx cheer, and he's like, well, what am I getting myself into here? And so when he took over the ship, and this is the point I think that really, really matters, talking about the impact leadership can have. All those sailors, roughly 300 on that ship, you as the captain of your ship, you don't get to fire people. You don't just come in and go, okay, I'm overhauling this whole place. All these sailors are out. We're going to bring a whole new crew in.
Say good night to the bad guy.
Exactly. And so when you take those 300 sailors who were booing the other captain off the ship, They were at the bottom of all testing on combat readiness. And within 9 months, Joe, 9 months, Captain Abrashoff took that ship from the bottom of the fleet to the #1 ship in the Pacific Fleet.
Attention.
And so what do you do with that? So what does that mean? Well, I think
how do you do that?
I think that's a great point. And when I look at that story, and I've had a chance to interview Captain Abrashoff, phenomenal guy, great leader, very humble. But when we talked about this, the first thing that he really talked about is really setting the foundation first. So when we look at higher education, we look at what's going on in the business, and we say the 7 most dangerous words in your business. We've always done it that way. Well, congratulations. That's not going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you used to do it that way, the consumer, and we can get upset if we want to about calling a student a consumer, or that's what they are. And so if we don't get into the proper mindset, running a school and saying, what do they want? What do they need? And am I giving them those things? And am I doing it in a way that they want? I'm in big trouble. So I think when we look at higher education, Joe, and you and I were talking about this offline, I think the first thing that needs to happen when we look at the school is we've got to say, as Jim Collins did, Good to Great, you've probably read that book.
Nailed it.
We got to get the right people on the bus.
Yep.
Then we got to get the wrong people off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it really first starts with the board of trustees. When you look at the board of trustees for your school, if you're sitting out there in leadership and you're listening to this podcast, the first thing we've got to do is be really honest with ourselves and say, what does my board of trustees look like? Do I have the right mix? Do I have the right group of thinkers? Do I have people that are prepared for the change it's not coming, it's here. So we can do about it.
Yeah. It's also really easy to say, yes, I think we do, but you may not.
Are you sure?
It's what you guys talked about when you had Dr. Porter on, and you were talking about, it's one thing to go in and talk about a merger or an acquisition, right? Oh yeah, let's go sit around, have a cup of coffee and talk about it. That's great.
Yep.
But that's not the same as preparing yourself for what that merger or that acquisition may look like. So when we look at the business, when we look at higher education, I think we first got to get the board right. And that's a mix of different thinkers and people that are willing to look at what's changed in higher education, and then being willing to have the courage to make change.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of making change, and I read your book. I love it because it was like being slapped in the face in a good way.
Yeah.
It makes you go, okay, wait a second. What am I accepting? How do I make it better? And the awareness that you have to have all the time about customer service or serving people. It's 100% all the time. And one of my favorite lines in this book is like in the first part, it's page 26. And it's I often tell my clients that the enemy to becoming excellent is being really good. And I went, whoa, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I have said, well, we're really good at that. And it's almost like complacency being the enemy of success. Same kind of thing, where you get really good at something and you think you're really good at it. So why change, or why even look at it? One of my favorite sayings is, don't rock the boat. And I'm like, I want to rock the boat. You have to want to rock the boat. Otherwise, you're just accepting that you're just always floating. Is floating good enough?
Joe, without friction, things don't get better. And, when you look at that quote, about complacency, and that's really what it's about. We get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
We've hit a certain level of success, and then we feel like, hey, I don't have to work at this anymore. And it's actually the exact opposite of that. Exactly. This is going to sound like you're going to go, Gary, well, how does this relate to what we're talking about? There's a gentleman named Dr. Phil Stutz. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a psychotherapist, and he has a documentary out with Jonah Hill, and he's talking about, yeah, great actor. And he's Jonah's psychotherapist. And what he talks about in this, and this is about being a lifelong learner, but what he talks about in this is he talks about the need for us to understand this simple point. There's only 3 things in life that are guaranteed. Right. And he talks about what those are. They are uncertainty.
That's true.
Pain.
That's true too.
And hard work.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
And at the end of the day, if we're not prepared to understand that, if we're not lifelong learners as leaders and as people within the organization that are trying to drive to grow our business and to get people on our team to think the right way, we're in really, really big trouble.
Mhm.
And it's those three things that we have to be prepared for in higher education. They're not going to go away. No matter how good, Joe, we can build the greatest Lindenwood University on the planet, but if we're not rocking that boat, if we're not saying what's the next thing I need to be working on, then we're going to find ourselves waking up one day and we're in last place.
What's the difference between customer service and
Wow.
right? I downloaded this for you, by the way.
Wow.
I love that.
Your book, Wowed.
Wow.
Being wowed is there's customer service and there's, good customer service, but the wow factor. And the reason I wanted you on this podcast is because the idea of the wow factor needs to be in higher education today, because there is so much parity between institution. What's quality education in A versus B or A versus A1? You can go anywhere in the world now with online education. You better wow somebody to get them to come to your institution. But wow is more than higher ed. Isn't it a mindset almost?
It's 100% mindset, and it's all about relationships. So let's take the Ivy League out of this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. If we're not Harvard or we're not Yale or we're not Princeton, where somebody is picking you for a very specific academic reason, there's lots of institutions out there that I can choose to get for example, my doctorate.
Yes.
A lot of places I can go. So why would I choose the school that I'm going to choose?
That's a good question.
It's about connection. When you had a chance to interview Dr. Nito Cobain,
Mm-hmm.
one of my all-time favorites, love him. And I love what he did when he came into High Point. When he came into High Point in 2005, there's nobody on the planet that knows more about wowing than Dr. Cobain.
Mm-hmm.
He hired a director of wow at High Point. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
That person's only job, Joe, was to go around the campus and look for the things that needed to be done to wow students. If there was a dirt pathway somewhere where the students were taking a shortcut between buildings, the director of wow would come back to Dr. Cobain and say, well, I think we need to put a brick pathway there.
Yeah.
And he said, I think you're right. Do it. And so it was this mindset that at the top, the leader said, we are going to wow people. When you walk onto that campus, I'm going in there to I'm going to film it in July because I think it's such a powerful story about what's going on with relational wowing of students. I really feel like wow. And when you think about enrollment and you think about the chance I have to get somebody on the phone, if somebody takes the time, real quick story, Joe, if we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get somebody to ring the phone, they've seen our website. We've upgraded our website. It's got beautiful things on it. It looks beautiful. The format's great. I've got all this money being spent to get my enrollment up, and they pick the phone up.
Yep.
Or they chat me.
Yep.
And I don't respond quickly. I don't connect. I sound like I had a bad decade.
Yep.
What do you think happened to all the money we just spent?
Cheers.
We don't know. It's confusing. That was me hitting two buttons at once.
It's both those things. And at the end of the day, wowing people is really about emotion. It's about relationship. It's about connection. When you hear Dr. Cobain talk about connect, he says, we must build the bridge of understanding from them to us, not from us to them.
Yes.
Epic.
And so you and I were having a conversation the other day about, how do you connect with these young students today?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Well, they're all texters. Okay, well, maybe be a contrarian.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean by that? Well, why don't you call them? Oh, well, only 10% of them are going to answer. Well, great. If 10% of them answer and your enrollment goes up 10%, you're doing high fives.
You got that right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think wowing, when you look at this model, if I get my board right and my board understands that I must grow, and I get my president right, and the president gets the department heads right, it really does kind of roll downhill from there. And it comes down to my enrollment team. Does my enrollment team get it?
Good question.
Right? Do they connect? Do they want to connect? Do they understand why? At the end of the day, Joe, that team that you have is the most important team. I will argue they're the most important team in
the sales team, if you will.
Yes.
Amazing.
I would agree.
Right? Because as good as my academics are,
yeah,
as great as they are, as beautiful as my campus is, none of that matters if I don't get them to say yes.
Yep. And you can have a really, really good salesperson in an environment that is not as nice as the one that you are in, you being whoever's listening, and they will outsell the look of the campus, the academics, by being better at relational sales. They will sell it. They will sell themselves, because when you come into an institution, So much about why that student is buying is the person who's in front of them. They have to trust the person who's delivering the message.
There's no doubt about that. And I actually just recently talked to a Lindenwood student. We were talking about why she chose Lindenwood. I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
And she really felt like it was the responsiveness that she had received, that somebody got back to her quickly. I'll give you the opposite of that, Joe. I do a lot of consulting still, and I do a lot in the orthodontic industry, is one of the industries I do this in. So out of curiosity, you've seen this where you have a chat section on your, chat me or text me. So I texted this practice at 10 a.m. in the morning, said, I'm ready to start my daughter on orthodontics. Do you know when they responded? 4 p.m.
That's not good.
If you're in an instant gratification world and you're going to put something like texting or chatting on your website, you better be prepared to respond quickly.
Yep.
So when I think about wowing people, when I think about wowing students, when I think about connecting, we have to take every effort in our business and sit down and say, what are we doing to connect every single day? What does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And it really does start with getting that enrollment team really excited. I can't teach you passion, Joe. I can show you what it looks like.
True.
I can show you what it looks like. But if me as a leader, if I don't put people on my team that share my passion, that understand my vision, I'm going to have a very difficult time when I walk out of the room.
Yep.
To keep them excited.
How important is speed in wowing these days? Because we know that I was going to say kids, but we're talking about adults too, or any of us. We are on our mobile devices. We are scrolling. We are flipping. We are moving from video to video, text to text. We're fast. We answer. We text. We move. We get speed. And you brought it up. Sending something at 10 a.m. and getting a response back at 4. But speed in that context makes sense. But what about speed in other contexts? What about speed of service in general? Response times, getting information back to somebody. I mean, are people willing to wait anymore? Or do we have to be fast?
They're not willing to wait. Research says you've got about 7 seconds when they go to your website to make an impression before they'll hit the back button. So if they go to your website, first of all, if you just look at your front page of your website and you say, am I wowing them with what they see? Did I capture their attention? You got 7 seconds to do it before they'll hit the back button. So the answer is speed is a killer. And if we're not responsive, if we don't, another example, how long does it take for me to get admitted into your school?
Longer than it should sometimes.
Right. And that's the mindset. Well, when can I start? Oh, yes. Hey, Gary, we can't wait. We'd love to have you to school. Guess what? It's January. You can start in September.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I'm not coming.
Yep. And I always use this example, and I've said it to you before. I could move thousands between my bank accounts with a simple transfer button, thousands of dollars, and in a bank was heavily regulated. But I can't get myself through an enrollment process at an institution in that same amount of time, which is near instantaneous. Why? Why can I do it with my own assets and my thousands of dollars that the bank and the IRS want to track, but I can't do it to enroll? And it's like getting to that level of speed that is the difference between customer service and wow.
It's mindset, right?
Yep.
I mean,
get a little closer to the mic. Yeah.
It's mindset. I think paradigm shifting too. I did it.
See, you did it. You hit the mic.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Nailed it.
Exactly. So I think it's really about mindset too. I think one of the great things that you have at Lindenwood is you've got a chairman of the board who really gets it. You've got a president who I love the fact, and some of the people in the audience are going to cringe when I say this. I love the fact that he came from outside academia.
Yeah.
I think that's where we start to see significant growth happen within industries because we have a tendency to get stale, right? We have people running our businesses, and I've heard you guys talk about this a million times. We have people running our institutions where all they've ever known is their institutional life. Well, Gary, we're not for profit. Well, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yep.
But if you don't have more dollars coming in than you're spending, you're in trouble, right? So you can call it whatever you want to call it. Exactly. And that really comes down to, am I wowing? At the end of the day, this is all about wow. Am I wowing my faculty? Am I wowing my students? Am I wowing my leadership team? Am I doing the things organizationally I must do so that my team really understands that it's about relationship? At the end of the day, it is. Why do people quit their companies?
Because of their boss.
100%. We know this because Buckingham and Kaufman told us this in First Break All the Rules. It's a study done by Gallup over 30 years.
Yep.
So if that's,
And it's so true.
it's 100% true. And so when we look at that, when we look at our team, I was talking to somebody the other day about, I think I was telling you this, Joe, my dissertation is going to be on emotional intelligence. And we were talking about the relationship between emotional intelligence and effective leadership. And it's such a critical thing, right? And here's the first thing I say to people when we talk about emotional intelligence. If you've always, quote, always gotten results and you're, quote, good with numbers, well, congratulations. That's the price of admission.
Table stakes.
Yeah. So besides that, what are you doing to be different? What makes Nido Quabain so different at High Point? What is it?
You know, it's interesting that you asked that question because I've thought a lot about that. First of all, there's like an instantaneous bug within him to change things. It's like immediate change. But he talked about how he is an effective listener. He listens to all perspectives, but at the end of the day, he is the CEO also, and so he has to make a decision. So he's got an effective balance of understanding appreciated value, and he talked about a lot about the difference between value and appreciated value, which I thought was brilliant, right? And listening and decision making. I mean, he's gotten a balance that's been created over many, many, many years.
Yeah, and he does such a great job. You know, you'll hear him talk about. I asked him. I had a chance to interview him as well, and I asked him about leadership. I said, you know, Dr. Quabain, when you think about leaders, you know, what's our number one job? And, you know, he said, the number one job we have as leaders is to increase the capacity of those around us.
Excellent.
Well, how do we do that, right? That would be your next logical question.
Right.
Well, I have to inspire. I have to encourage. I have to develop.
Yep.
I have to have a vision that they believe in and understand. I must have value myself. They must trust that what I'm, you know, you heard him talk about it. It took him 3, 4, 5 years or whatever for people to finally go, you know what? I think this guy gets it.
Yep.
It's different. It's not really how we've always done things here. And I appreciate that. But look at the balance sheet and see if it's worked.
Yeah.
They went from $56 million on the balance sheet
to over $1 billion.
To over $1 billion.
They're $1 billion endowment. So he's doing something right. Now, one thing I'll say about him is he figured out his market.
Yes.
He said, our market is a residential 18-year-old student coming to campus. If you're going to wow effectively, you really have to understand who it is you're trying to wow. And we're talking about wow, or at least I have been externally, like, let me wow the student. But wow happens internally.
No doubt.
You have to wow each other. You have to, and, you know, it's almost like, you know, that person that sends you an email and you don't respond for a week because you sat on it. Business is hurt by that. So how it's all about the mindset, wowing individuals within so that you can wow without. Does wowing your customer start inside, or does it start outside and come in? You know what I'm asking?
Well, let me give you this analogy.
Yeah.
So your question is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Right. So if I go out and I do this tremendous job of building a business and I have great marketing, unbelievable website, great brochures, unbelievable social media, and then I have really crappy staff, what am I going to grow?
Disappointed!
I'm probably, and that may sound harsh, but that's just a reality.
It's true.
So when I get asked all the time, hey, Gary, if you could pick great marketing or a great team, which one would you pick? And I say, yes.
Yeah.
And they go, well, no. You don't seem to understand. You have to pick one. I'm like, oh, if I have to pick one, it's really simple. I will pick a great team every single time, and I can still grow.
Yeah, because your team becomes your marketing engine.
Yep. It's 100%. So
referrals.
100%. So when I ask people all the time,
you did say 100%, by the way.
100%, yeah. If I'm going to look at how much money gets spent to market, for example, Lindenwood, and we look at those dollars, at the end of the day, as important as those dollars are, and please hear me, I'm not discounting those.
Of course.
We have to do that. But if I don't have the right people, if I don't have people that believe in my message, that understand what we're about, that, getting back to your point about the internal team, that really truly care about each other, and that we know we care about each other, that we've created an environment of trust. If I haven't done those things, all those marketing dollars, I might get them to ring the phone, but I'm not going to sustain that growth. Yep. I can't, because that feeling that they're getting transcends from not just that first phone call, but example, I'm taking my doctorates online. You asked about that. So I'm online.
Of course.
I was blown away by one of the professors who actually graded a paper the same day I turned it in.
True.
I actually fell out of my chair. I'm like, wait a minute. Did this happen? Or they responded to an email the same day. So you talked about response time.
Yeah.
It matters. And building the right team, getting that team to care, getting that team to trust what we're trying to get done, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, is essential. I think we have to do that first. This team has to trust each other. They have to feel connected to each other. They have to feel comfortable saying something that may not be taken so well.
That is a thing.
Isn't it?
Is a thing. Yeah, that's a thing. Because then you it's interesting because and this has happened really at any institution that you work for, maybe any businesses, you might see something that's ineffective and you see maybe perhaps that the person who's leading it is ineffective, but how do you call that out? Because do you stay in your lane? Do you go, hey, you know what, this is ineffective and I feel comfortable bringing this up in a respectful way, but do you not? Do you let it go on? All those things start fumbling around and that hurts the wow factor.
Absolutely. Right? The emperor with no clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something? Should I say? What happens if I do? You know, I go into leaders all the time, Joe, and we talk about transparency and building this environment of high trust.
Yep.
Stephen Covey talks about in the book, The Speed of Trust, about what the cost is of not having high trust. And I'll go into leaders and I'll give you a classic example. I was with one not too long ago and I said to her, now listen, we're going to do this workshop. And I'm going to ask the people on your team to give me feedback on what's going really well. It's based on an exercise called coffee stains. And this was done in the book, The Search of Excellence. And it's the story about a CEO of an airline that gets on his plane. They don't know he's a CEO. Plane takes off. The young lady next to him puts the tray table down. There's a big, huge, nasty coffee stain on the tray table. Well, she looks at the tray table. She looks at the carpet. She looks up around the luggage. She nudges him, not knowing he's the CEO, and says, man, if they take care of the engines, like they take care of the interior, we're in big trouble.
Oh,
and so it was a real,
Yikes.
Exactly. It was a real eye opener for this CEO. And so in the book talks about this. So I use this exercise a lot. So I say to the CEO, be prepared. I'm going to ask for honest feedback. Oh yeah. Honest. I'm good with honest feedback. I said, well, just be sure.
Yeah.
Cause I'm going to ask. And so when I ask, you have to be open-minded. Oh, I'm 100% open-minded. I said, okay. So we're in this office doing this presentation. I'm doing this workshop. One of the things I ask is, give me some feedback you hear from your customers. And one of the leaders says, well, you know, we hear it. It's warm in here, you know, that our temperature, that it's warm. And the CEO, as soon as this is said, jumps right. Oh, it's not hot in here. What are you talking about? It's not hot. Now, keep in mind, Joe, I am not a sweater and I'm doing the workshop and I'm sweating profusely. And you should have seen the air go out of that balloon with that group as soon as that CEO jumped in and said those words. So when we're creating this environment, right, getting back to, and I think your point you bring up is essential in this whole conversation. When we're thinking about our team, we have to get that team right first.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything else really kind of doesn't matter. I can have a good message and I can have good marketing, but if my team doesn't believe, they don't believe in the message, it matters. When you go to Disney, you've been to Disney?
Of course. I lived in Southern Cal. I've been to Disney more times than I could count.
Then you'll get this. You know, there's a reason when you go to Disney that Grumpy's not the first person that greets you at the front door. It's not Grumpy. It's Goofy or it's Donald Duck. It might be Cinderella. It could be Mickey Mouse.
Why?
But grumpiness, we can't have it. And a lot of that, we look at, oh, well, that's my, you know, it's my team and my team, you know, it's their fault. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's your fault. Because if you haven't set the expectation of what great service looks like and what wow looks like, and Joe, if you don't hold them to that standard, how can you possibly get frustrated with them?
Right.
Whose fault is that?
Right. That's a good question.
Right.
What do we do with, okay, so you've talked about how we create wow, and that's getting the team right. How do you, if you've created it, how do you sustain it? Because it's the whole idea that it's easier to win the NBA championship than it is to win it twice. All right. How do you keep the wow factor going?
Because we never get there. So the mindset we have to have as leaders is there's no mountain top and we stop and go, oh, you know, we're here.
We've wowed everybody. We're packing in.
We're good.
Yep.
Because guess what? The mountain top just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Why? Because the expectation of the consumers changed. Don't think that's true? How'd you used to buy things before Amazon?
I'd go into a store.
Yeah. Did that completely change the mindset of the way we buy things?
Oh, I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we all think about, well, you know, in higher education, you know, I'm measuring myself against the other higher education institutes in terms of satisfaction. No, you're not. You know who you're measuring yourself against? The best service they get today. That's who they're measuring you against.
The best service they get today. But tomorrow is going to be a new set of players.
Absolutely. And the bar just keeps rising. So the way we sustain this wow factor is we have to admit to ourselves that we never get there. We always have to strive to get stronger, better, 1% better every day. Is that hard? Yeah. Yeah, man, it's hard.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's fruitful. And that's important.
Well, it has to be part of the culture and it has to be part of the strategy.
It's all part of the plan.
If we don't have the plan right, nothing else matters. And that's one of the things I loved when I looked at Lindenwood and I looked at what you guys did with your strategic plan. And I had a chance to go through that in detail. And I think it really matters. I think if you don't have that foundation first, it's really difficult to get the rest of the team to buy into what you're trying to do, how you're trying to transform the business. So it's a constant, ever evolving, never hit it kind of mindset.
Don't settle for average marketing strategies. Join us at the Element 451 Engage Summit, June 27 and 28, and discover how to harness the power of AI technology in higher ed marketing. Connect with industry leaders, explore cutting-edge technologies, and future-proof your marketing strategy. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. Register now at engage.element451.com. Their premier EdTech event is right around the corner.
Epic.
Anthology Together is the destination for visionaries, educators, and learners ready to unleash the power of education technology. EdUp will be on site for the thought-provoking keynotes, peer-driven discussions, and unparalleled networking opportunities. We guarantee you will leave inspired and connected. You don't want to miss it. Book your tickets to Nashville for AT23, July 17th to July 20th. Register today at anthologytogether.com. You know, Gary, one of the topics that, as we transition, one of the topics that I think we have to talk about, and we've talked about it a lot, is value. What does an institution need to offer? How does it assess its value? How does the consumer assess value? Forget higher ed in general. We're talking about sales and customer.
Right.
Value is an important topic.
Well, it's perceived by the consumer, right? So let me put my academic hat on for a second. For the audience, they need to go pull this article, Harvard Business Review, The Elements of Value. It was written by Almquist, Senior, and Block, 2016. Maybe the best article I've ever written or I've ever read. I wish I wrote.
The best article you've ever written is yet to come.
Yeah, it's on its way. But one of the best I've ever read in terms of what value is and how it matters. And they go through this whole principle and they kind of put it into a pyramid concept of things about like functional needs that people have. And they kind of relate it a little bit to the hierarchy of needs, but at a much deeper level. And they actually go through quantitatively and demonstrate, Joe, by the number of needs, by the number of value propositions that you fulfill for a customer, it has a direct impact on your net promoter score, right? And we all know what net promoter score is.
We hope. And
it has a direct impact on revenue. And so these things matter. So value, we have to figure out what the value proposition looks like. This article, though, I'm telling you, without sitting here and regurgitating it, the audience needs to read it. I think it'll open a lot of eyes in terms of, okay, are we fulfilling some of these functional things? Speed, you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, that would be one. Self-actualization. Does that matter in higher education? Yes. Right.
Epic.
Very. And so we have people going back to school, getting doctorates at 80 years old.
Yep.
Why are they doing that? Are they doing that because they need to? No.
Never. Yeah.
And so I think we have to look at our model. We have to look at who's coming back to school. We have to understand what makes us really good. I think we have to go through this value proposition, read this article, sit down with your leadership team and say, how are we doing on these things?
And I think a lot of and a lot of schools and just speaking the higher ed, you have to take the time to crystallize it, because if you can't say and repeat your value proposition, then the consumer or the customer or the student has absolutely no idea how to interpret what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it comes down to too, is they weigh it, right? They're going to weigh the value proposition, the cost and the weight of what, and they're going to say, does this outweigh, does the value outweigh the cost? They will say yes to you almost every time when the value outweighs the cost.
No matter what the cost is, as long as the value exceeds it.
100%. And so, but we have to do a better job, I think, as a leadership team within higher education, sitting down not only with our leadership team, but with our faculty, and saying, are we fulfilling these needs of our students?
That's a really interesting article, because if you can quantitatively, well, even if you could break down the value into needs and say a checkbox, are we hitting this one, or are we not hitting this one? All right, because it's hard to extract a value checklist of some kind.
How do you figure that out?
I don't know. You tell me.
Go ask.
Yeah.
So people go, oh, I mean, well, how do I know if somebody's, if we're hitting it? Well, the first thing is go ask them. What is your student body saying right now?
Mm-hmm.
What is your residential student body saying? What is your online student body saying? What is your faculty saying? What is your community saying about your ability to fulfill the needs that they have? That's something Big Lindenwood's working on right now.
Yep.
Is, hey, what needs are there out in the community that we can fill as a higher education institution? Right. But we got to go ask them.
Yeah, asking makes a difference. But what do you do with the information when you get it? And how does that relate back to WOW? Right. So if you take this all back, you can survey your students all day. You could survey the external stakeholders all day. You can get all of this information on what they value. Then what?
So, Joe, ideas are a dime a dozen. World's full of all kinds of great ideas.
Yep.
Right.
I have many of them.
I am the smartest man alive.
I was trying to get that one in.
I love that. Ideas are a dime a dozen. There's all kinds of great ideas out there, but the difference between an idea and success is execution. So if I go out and perform this study, if I go out and find out what's important, it really doesn't come down to which idea is better than another. There's a lot of good ideas, but I have to be willing to execute on that. It all comes down to execution at the end of the day. There's all kinds of ways to run a higher education institution. You'd agree with that?
I would agree.
There's more than one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the way, it's about executing every day on that way and using the feedback that you get from your consumer to determine what things I should be performing and doing it every single day. So it's really just about execution. I have to execute on those ideas. I have to take them back. I have to do something with them. How many times have you been involved when somebody's asked your opinion? You're like, oh yeah, let me tell you how I feel about that. And you go back and nothing changes.
Yeah, that's pretty typical. Not for me, but I'm saying especially for higher education, right? And I hear that because my book, Commencement, people will come up to me and say, you know what, thank you, because I can actually put this on the table and I can say, hey, see, another institution is doing this and it's written in a book. And sometimes people need a catalyst, right? And WOW can be that. If you try to provide an exemplary level of customer service, maybe something you have never done before, and you get feedback, it becomes like infectious. It can infect you with positive vibes for you to be able to move a team forward. But you have to share that information. It has to be transparent. It has to be pushed out.
No doubt.
And a lot of times we're bad silo-wise at informing each other of what's happening in the business.
Last point on this to wrap up, Joe. I think that we as leaders, and this really comes down to leadership, we have to be prepared to ask for the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for the truth. And when you've asked for it, be prepared to hear it. Because it's not always going to be what you want to hear. And how I respond to that, not how I react, how I respond to that matters. Because if I react to that information, if I shoot the messenger, guess what? They're never going to come tell me what I need to hear.
Yep, ever again.
Yeah. So I have to build an environment, and I'm going to keep saying this, but I have to build an environment that creates high trust. If I can get that done, people will come into my office and they'll say, Joe, can I tell you something I don't think we're doing right in enrollment? Sure. Let's talk about it. And that's the environment of WOW. It's this constant, ever pushing to be the best. And we have to do that as leaders. We have to create that environment by seeking the truth and being prepared to hear it.
We like to ask our guests the same two questions to end every episode here at the EdUp Experience. Number one, I've got a book in my hands right now called WOW'd, Using the Principles of WOW to Create Incredible Customer Service. Question one, what did we not say about this book? Any topics that need to be brought up or things that make this book really, truly important that you want to bring up to the audience?
A couple things. I think it's simple. The simpler, the better. What I've heard about this book from people that have read it is it's a simple message. I'm not going to give you anything in this book that you haven't heard before. You're not going to go, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Never heard that. That's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is, do you read this book, and you can read it in a weekend?
Yep.
You read this book. What idea or ideas can you take from this book? And as I've said earlier, execute on immediately.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I can do is take a checkup, as Zig Ziglar used to say, of the neck up. And when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning and I don't like how my higher institution is going, don't feel good about it, guess what? I got bad news and good news. Bad news is, person staring back at you at the mirror as the leader, they're ultimately affecting that.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is, you can change it really quickly if you decide that you want to hear the truth and you want to make a difference. So that would be probably the main thing from the book, Joe, is it's a simple read with good ideas. All I ask you to do with them is take an idea or two from it and execute.
And I will tell you, and just to back it up, because I read it and I have it on my bookshelf. And by the way, I don't keep a lot of books on my bookshelf. I like the ones that I like, because they smack me in a way to, and you're right. There's nothing in this book that is an original concept, but it's original when I am not doing it and I need to be doing it better.
That's right.
And I really loved that. I immediately took this and I was like, okay, how do we make it something better right now? It made me motivated to go out and
that's great.
Wow something.
Awesome.
And that makes a big difference, right? Mindset. Number two, what do you see as you're a student of the game? You're in a higher education institution. You're getting your doctorate. You've worked with higher ed institutions. You're been a part of one. What do you see for the future of higher ed?
I think it's the greatest time ever for higher education.
Hmm.
I think it's the best time ever. I think disruption matters. I think it makes everything better. Nothing better happens without friction.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think is going to happen is I think after some consolidation goes on and there'll be some tweaking here and there, we will have the greatest higher education system the world's ever known.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, I could say that I'm pretty confident that you're going to get something out of this episode. I know I did with my guest today, your guest today. Here he is. He's Gary Johnson. He is the author of Wow, Using the Principles of Wow to Create Incredible Customer Service. Gary, thanks for coming on the EdUp Experience today.
Thanks, Joe.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Experience Element 451's Engage Summit Conference this June and get ready to unleash the power of AI in higher ed marketing. Deep dive into how this emerging tech will revolutionize the education landscape, from personalized student engagement to turbocharging your marketing efforts with AI. These sessions are guaranteed to help you smash your enrollment goals. Connect with like-minded professionals, explore cutting-edge ed tech products and services, and leave with the knowledge to supercharge your institution's growth. Don't wait. Register now at engage.element451.com and seize your chance to lead the pack in the AI-driven education revolution. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off your registration. Now, what can you expect at AT23? That's Anthology Together 2023. Well, expect to look into the future, expand your network, and explore solutions with experts. You're going to hear from industry thought leaders. You're going to connect with countless opportunities and people representing different institutions across the globe. You might even get to test out some new tech and help drive future anthology technology. That's right, Anthology Together. Registration is open at anthologytogether.com.